All right, let's talk about studying. Today, we're going to ditch those old, ineffective habits that, let's be honest, we were all probably taught. Instead, we're diving into a much smarter way to learn, one that's actually backed by the science of how our brains are wired.
Sound familiar? I mean, we've all been there, right? You spend hours highlighting, rereading, you pull that all-nighter, totally convinced you've nailed it, then you sit down for the exam and poof, it's just gone. It is so frustrating, and it makes you feel like all that hard work was for nothing. But here's the good news. It's not you. It's your technique.
Yeah, these methods we all use, just rereading our notes over and over, cramming everything in the night before, they're the real problem. See, they feel productive, but what they're really doing is creating something called an illusion of competence. It's a trick. You feel like you know the material, but you haven't actually locked it in. So today, we're building a smarter approach from the ground up.
Okay, so to study smarter, we first got to understand the hardware we're working with, right? Our brains. Because here's the wild part. Every single time you learn something new, you are physically changing your brain. It's a process called neuroplasticity.
Think of it like this. Your brain is a super dense forest. The very first time you try to learn a new concept, it's like you're hacking your way through all this thick undergrowth with a machete. It's slow, it's really difficult. But every time you revisit that idea, you're walking that same path again. You're clearing it out, widening it, until bam! It becomes this well-worn, easy-to-travel road. That, in a nutshell, is learning.
This famous quote really gets to the heart of it all. Neurons that fire together, wire together. See, when you actively engage with the material, your brain cells, your neurons, they start firing in sync. And the more they do that, the stronger that connection gets, creating that nice, clear path for your memory. But the key word here, the one that changes everything, is actively.
But, your brain does have its limits, and we need to talk about something called cognitive load. Basically, it's the total amount of mental effort you're using in your working memory. Think of that as your brain's temporary scratch pad. The thing is, it has a very limited capacity. If you try to cram too much stuff in there at once, it just overloads. And just like a full funnel, nothing else is getting through. Learning literally just stops.
Here's another way to picture it, but I think really helps. Think of your brain power for any given study session like your phone battery. The actual learning part, let's call that the necessary load. But then you've got the external load. We're talking distractions, notifications popping up, people talking nearby, even music with lyrics. All that stuff drains your battery without helping you learn one bit, leaving you with way less power for what actually matters.
Now, check this out. This is where it gets crazy. This slide shows hard data on our single biggest distraction, the phone. A study measured cognitive performance based on just the phone's location. And the results are, well, they're staggering. Your performance is highest when the phone is in a completely different room. It drops when it's in your pocket or a bag, and it hits rock bottom when the phone is just sitting on the desk in front of you, even if it's turned off. I mean, think about that. The mere presence of your phone is actively draining your brain's battery.
Okay, so we've seen the problem, we've looked at the science behind it, now for the good part, the solution. Let's start building our toolkit with some evidence-based strategies that actually work with our brain's design, not against it. First up, it turns out it's not just how you study, but when you study. Yep, timing is everything. So let's look at how to totally master your schedule for maximum impact.
So this right here is the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, and it shows a pretty harsh reality. If we don't reinforce what we learn, we forget most of it within just a few days. See that steep drop? That's your brain after a cram session. But look at that line climbing back up at the top. That's the antidote. It's called spaced practice. By simply spacing out your study sessions, you're actively fighting against this natural curve. And this isn't just theory. We can actually see this happening inside the brain. On the left, that's the brain activity from cramming. See how it's super high at first, then just plummets? Now look at the right. That's spaced learning. Notice how the brain activity is maintained over time. You are literally keeping those neural pathways strong and healthy just by revisiting them after a break. Okay. Another powerful timing trick is something called interleaving. So instead of studying one topic for, say, 3 hours straight, that's called blocked practice, you try studying 3 related topics for 1 hour each, and you switch between them. Now, fair warning, it will feel harder. It'll feel less productive because your brain has to work to switch gears. But guess what? That extra effort is exactly what builds a deeper, more flexible understanding that's going to stick around.
All right, so we've covered when to study. Now for the second part of our toolkit, how to study. What should you actually be doing during those focused, spaced-out sessions? Well, the key in one word is to be active, not passive.
Okay, this might be the most powerful strategy of them all. It's called retrieval practice, and it's simply the act of actively pulling information out of your memory. This is the complete opposite of just passively rereading your notes. Think about it. Every single time you pull a memory out, you make it stronger. It's not reviewing. It's more like doing a bicep curl for your brain.
And you can start doing this like right now. It's a super simple process. Step 1, hide your notes. Just put them away. Step 2, on a totally blank sheet of paper, write or sketch out everything you can possibly remember about a topic. And finally, and this part is absolutely crucial, you check your work. Compare what you wrote to your actual notes to see what you got right and, more importantly, what you missed. That's where the real learning happens, right there in correcting those errors and filling in the gaps.
Next up in our toolkit is elaboration. This is the thing that takes you from just memorizing random facts to truly understanding them. It's all about finding meaning by asking yourself questions. Don't just accept a fact as is. Ask, how does this work? Why is this true? And how does this connect to something I already know?
So how do you actually do this? Well, try explaining a concept out loud, like you're teaching it to a friend. Or take two different ideas from your class and ask yourself, how are they similar? How are they different? Or, even better, connect what you're learning to some personal memory or experience in your own life. These connections create more hooks for your brain to grab onto when you need to retrieve the information later. And finally, we have dual coding. This is such a straightforward but really powerful idea. See, our brains process verbal stuff, words, and visual stuff, pictures, in two separate channels. So by combining both of them to represent the same concept, you're giving your brain two completely different ways to store and recall that information. You're basically doubling your memory pathways. It's a no-brainer.
And this is where you can have some fun with it. Don't just write down boring lists of words. Turn your notes into a mind map. Draw a little diagram that explains a complex process. You could create a simple timeline or, hey, even a comic strip to tell the story of a historical event. The act of transforming that information into something visual is what makes it stick.
Whew, we have covered a lot, from the deep neuroscience of learning to a whole toolkit of practical strategies. So now, let's bring it all together into a simple game plan that you can start using, like today.
So if you remember anything, remember this. First, treat your attention like it's gold. Seriously, put that phone in another room. Second, space out your study sessions. No more cramming. Third, when you do sit down to study, don't just reread. Actively test yourself. And finally, bring your notes to life with diagrams, sketches, anything visual.
Look, you don't have to do everything all at once. Real, lasting change comes from taking small, consistent steps. So I'm going to leave you with this one question to think about. Based on everything we've just talked about, what is the one thing, just one, that you could change in your study routine starting tomorrow that would make the biggest difference for you? Thanks so much for tuning in.